welcome everyone. This is BookSwell American Horror Stories. I'm Cody Sisco, and I'm super happy to welcome back my co-host tonight, Kate Maruyama, who was here for a BookSwell event on writing better futures. Was that back in May? It seems like forever ago.
Yeah, a while ago.
But that was such a delightful conversation. So Kate's back, and now we're speaking with 4 horror authors and editors, and I will let her kick it off in a moment, but I do want to let everyone know how awesome Kate is. She is a writer, author, teacher, editor who lives in LA, and she has a book coming out in January of 2021, which we are so looking forward to, which is called Family Solstice, and is from Omnium Gatherum Press. Who we also have the editor of Omnium Gatherum Press, Kate Jonez. So welcome, Kate, also. So Kate had reached out to me and said, you know, I really want to do something focused on horror because we're living through it right now. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So here's what we're going to be talking about today. Throughout narrative history, horror has been used to reflect the things we are afraid of or are dealing with as a society. From Frankenstein's reflected fear of the Industrial Revolution and meddling with nature, to Dracula's dealings with Victorian ideas of sexuality, to the zombie survivalist's fear of a dying planet rife with contagion. 4 horror authors and editors talk about what they write and publish and how to move forward as the world dishes out new horrors daily. We can't stop watching the news because it's worse in a way than anything we could write ourselves. So I'm happy to be here with Kate and to be featuring Serena Mason, Kate Jonez, Michael Paul Gonzalez, and Nicole Sconiers, which I'm not sure I pronounced that right.
Very close. Sconiers.
Sconiers. Welcome, and Kate, take it away. Thank you.
All right. Hi. I'm really happy that all of these writers could make it tonight and that Cody could host us. I'm a writer and horror writer and a teacher. My American Horror Story class, which I teach at Antioch University, Los Angeles BA program, is running right now, and we look at a variety of genre stories and how the times in which they were written affected them and were affected by them. We've read everything from Shirley Jackson's The Lottery up to Nicole Sconiers' Here Come the Janes, and another great story of hers called Scotoma. We look at horror, sci-fi, and speculative fiction. I'm really happy to have these folks here with us tonight. And I'd like you to just introduce yourselves, tell us a little about yourselves, and also answer the question, what was one of your favorite horror stories in a specific time period that really caught the spirit of something larger that was going on? First off, we have Michael Paul Gonzalez.
Boy. Hi, I'm Michael Paul Gonzalez. I'm an author. I don't know if this is going to be on camera because of the, nope. All right.
No.
I have the green screen background. I have a new collection of short stories that's coming out soon. It's called Carry Me Home, Stories of Horror and Heartbreak, which collects all of my most recently published short stories into one book. And I guess another good place to start, I have a horror audio drama called Larkspur Underground, which is available for free on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. And I think I had a list of movies. I noticed one of the things, I was thinking of like movies from the 90s for some reason, because the first one I thought of was Saw. But there was also another movie, a Canadian movie called The Cell, and another one called, The Cube was the Canadian movie. The Cell is obviously an American movie with J-Lo. But all of them kind of deal with this, that kind of that bridge that happened right after Gen X, I guess you could say, when everybody kind of couldn't figure out where things were going. So all of these horror movies kind of deal with like puzzles and why is this happening and how do we get out of this and where do we go? That kind of lost existential dread feeling. So I feel like that, you know, I guess Saw, probably the most well-known out of those, is kind of when I think of like late 90s horror, turn of the century kind of stuff. That's the one that comes to mind for me.
All right, next up we have Kate the First, and my editor, I'm so excited, Kate Jonez.
Well, hi, I'm Kate Jonez, author of my most recent book was Lady Bits, a collection of female-focused horror. And I'm also an editor at Omnium Gathering. We've got a whole lot of books coming out because everything from this year got bumped into the fall. So now I don't have time to breathe. But turns out the fall isn't as great as we had hoped. So there's still an awful lot of news. So we may be
I think there might be some news around November going on. You know, people might be a little distracted.
We might be waiting to January for the majority of our releases this year.
Mm-hmm.
And, but very exciting, lots of great work coming out. So I'm having a really difficult time deciding between two. So can I have two?
Yes, of course.
So my first pick was Goblin Market by Christina Rossetti, which is actually a poem, as everyone probably knows. But it really captured the time period, because what do you do with a woman who gives into her sexuality when there's no other place on earth for her to go? Once she's been with a goblin, I mean, there's no going back. So all that she gets to do is lay around and go into an asylum or something. You've got to be crazy if you're not going to behave yourself as a proper lady. So it's not technically horror, but I've always found it very horrifying in a beautiful way.
When did that come out?
I know, I should have looked that up. It was around the time, I want to say late 19th century, early 20th century.
Right.
It was the, who were the painters that did all the Flaming Junes and all the, I should have looked things up.
That's all right. No, I just, that gives a general idea, like yellow wallpaper period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my other choice is a very similar story, but set in the 1990s, early 2000s. So it's by Sarah Gran, Come Closer. And if you haven't read this, I really recommend it. I just came across it recently. It's the story of a woman who has all the things she's supposed to want, a nice house, a good job as an architect, a great husband. And then this demon comes along and makes her smoke cigarettes and sleep with strangers and burns her whole life down. So it's kind of the same story, but just, I love those two. And,
yeah, well, thanks. Nicole D. Sconiers.
Well, I am Nicole D. Sconiers, and I'm a writer of horror and speculative fiction and also sci-fi. I wrote a collection of short stories entitled Escape from Beckyville, Tales of Race, Hair, and Rage. I also wrote a short story, Kim, which was published in Sycorax's Daughters, which is an anthology of Black women's horror. And most recently, I have a piece in Black from the Future, which is a collection of speculative fiction that was published by BLF Press. And a story that really speaks to me right now is Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. And it takes place in an alternate universe right around the time of the Civil War, well, after the Civil War, when zombies have just overrun the country. So it spoke to me about what's going on in the country because zombies are considered a disease. And Black people are being tested for a vaccine for zombies. And with COVID, a couple of months ago, a French scientist suggested that Black people should be the first to be tested for a COVID vaccine. So there's some parallels with what's going on right now, really scary parallels.
There's too many these days. Everything I'm reading, like rereading from even 5-6 years ago, it takes on really terrifying levels. So, and next up, Rena Mason.
Hi, everyone. My name is Serena Mason, and I'm a horror author, and I also write dark speculative fiction and science fiction. I have a short story coming out, I believe it towards the end of September, called The Ninth Tale, and it's in the Black Cranes anthology, edited by Lee Murray and Genevieve Flynn, and it's tales of unquiet women by Omnium Gatherum. That's an Omnium Gatherum book. And did you want to add something, Kate?
No, I loved it. I love every story in this. Everyone's got to read this collection.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that one. And then I also have a story coming out in Weird Tales magazine in October with Jonathan Mayberry and James Aquilone as the editors on that one. And I'm really excited about that too. And as far as stories, I'm going to be, well, it might be plain and simple, but for me it wasn't, because at the time I had moved to upstate New York, and I was living on an Air Force base. And so The Mist for me really resonated that feeling of, you know, military experiments, the Cold War, and also the whole satanic panic thing that was going on at the time with religion, you know. And there was a lot of and I felt like from the horror community it was like a pushback, you know, making the super religious fanatics look bad, those stories. So that really resonated with me at the time. So The Mist by Stephen King is a novella, but
that's awesome. That's a good call too. So I wanted to ask you all, and here, just, you know, jump in, whoever thinks of it first. Do you find yourselves consciously or unconsciously dealing with what's going on in the culture around us when you write your stuff, or does it kind of seep in, you know, on its own?
Well,
I do.
Yeah.
I know a couple of these answers already. I just wanted you to. And in what way? How's that?
I think on my end, I would say I don't consciously set out to write stories most of the time, I should say, about you know, things that are happening, current events. But there are always elements that sink into it. I would say last year I had a horror story published in an anthology of pizza-themed horror, and it, which was a crazy book. It's called Tales from the Crust, if anybody wants to check that out.
I have it.
Yeah. So that is probably my most overtly political thing, because it happened. I started writing right about, I don't know, Trump did something, and it turned
Back
into
in the
this whole,
day.
like, yeah, you know, it's
Right?
like this Illuminati pizza conspiracy, and it gets into really about like our consumer culture and obsession with wealth and the depths that people will sink to reach those heights that no one can attain, kind of thing. So that was as close as I got to current event kind of stuff.
Yeah. Nicole, you were.
I was so I don't consciously try to write about current events, but to me the personal is political. So sometimes when I'm writing about things that I'm dealing with, trauma, you know, certain issues that impact me, then I do find that it does seep into my work. Currently, I'm writing a collection of short stories that are set in the 80s, small town Pennsylvania, and set against the backdrop of the Atlanta child murders. So it's about a group of teens who are Black females who are coming of age in the 80s, and there's this specter of like loss of innocence. You know, that's throughout the story. I also wrote a story about a woman. So what's prevalent in the Black community is that Black women's health issues aren't necessarily taken seriously. So I was writing a story about a Black woman who had this foreign growth in her body, and her doctor kept showing her that, you know, it was nothing. Well, it turned out to be something monstrous in the end. And I didn't set out to critique the disparities in healthcare with Black women, but it just so happened that, you know, these issues seep into my writing.
Right. And did you find yourself sort of like coming up with, were you thinking about the issues first, or were you thinking about the character first and then which
I thought
came
about
first?
the character first, and then as the character started to speak, the issues came up with being your doctor gaslighting you, or people saying it's all in your head when you feel something growing in your body.
Yeah.
So it did speak to a larger issue, but at the time I was focused primarily on the character.
I'm always interested in the chicken or the egg part of it. So I think Rena had sort of.
Oh, yes. I don't intentionally set out to write about issues, but it always seeps into my work. I think here and there, and it also depends on like what the theme is. Sometimes when you anthologies have certain themes, and like one recently that I was invited to was about revolution, and I don't think of myself as revolutionary in any way, but I thought, okay, I'm gonna like really have fun with this. So I took current issues that are going crazy faster than people can keep up with it, and CRISPR. I wrote a story about CRISPR babies that were being made secretly, and really it was just like stories that have really gone on and happened, but I just like put a twist on it and made them something different. And then also like with The Evolutionist, which is my first novel, and when I set out to write that, it was more of I was writing for catharsis reasons, but then it turned out being sort of that way, where here's this normal woman, but then all these things are going wrong with her, and she doesn't know what's going on, and maybe it was it's something otherworldly were the reasons behind it. And I didn't set out to write it this way, but a friend of mine, poet Brian Wara, teaches that he taught that book in one of his classes to Southeast Asian writers on how to write being different, being the other as a metaphor.
Oh, cool.
So I mean, that was like one of the coolest things ever. So yeah, not intentional, but it turned out that way.
Right. And Kate, you tend to, in your stories, you tend to take on different things. Is it which comes first?
Well, usually the character comes first, but lately there's this idea that keeps percolating up, and I'm not sure I'm really ready for it, but maybe I'm going to try it.
Is it current or?
It's very current. Well, we know that Trump is a jerk and so many other things, but there are a lot of people around him who are also not wonderful. And once he's gone, they will remain. And we're going to have to decide what to do with people that, how do I put it? So in American history, there's just a long lineage of getting rid of people we don't like. The Native American people were put away. We have Guantanamo Bay, there's ICE. So would regular, ordinary people who want the country back put the red hats in the camp?
Right. That'll be really interesting.
So it's more of a science fiction idea, I think. Normally the kind of ideas that you handle in science fiction. But I think it deserves to be horror. It's a tough one, though. Anyone else with that idea?
It can be both, for sure. I think it's more often. Yeah, it's more often that we'll find a science fiction story that is actually also horror. They claim it, but we can claim it too. So I kind of wonder, we taught Bloodchild by Octavia Butler in my American Horror Story class. And what was funny about that is everyone reads things into it. It's about bodies, it's about possession, it's possessing our own bodies, it's about slavery. But, she has this little bookend that comes after the story in the collection Bloodchild that said, I was very interested by these moths that, you know, other bugs would lay their eggs in, and that sort of, what that sort of symbiotic relationship meant. And so all of the folks who were writing like, you know, long essays and things like that, so do you feel like it's a writer's like responsibility to get across certain tales, or does the story take on a life of its own once it's left our hands?
That is a really difficult question.
I'm sorry. I don't, it's not like a right or wrong. I'm just curious what you think about it, you know. I mean, I would, yeah.
Do you mean more in the process of writing, or like how it's received after it's complete? Like,
I don't know.
Once
I
it's
just
out there
wonder,
in the wild,
you know, once people started writing all those essays and things about it.
I think I lost my audio again.
Oh no.
There we go. Yeah.
Concepts that I've stepped back from, and like, I don't want to put that out in the world because, you know, people will think I'm weird or crazy or psychopath. So
do you think about the effect your story might have on readers?
I have a story about a mother who sets her children on fire, which everyone who's been a mother has had that impulse, I believe.
No comment.
I know, right? So I really hesitated about putting that one out there because my children are alive. They are.
Yes. But
everyone thinks of it. I hope. Now that I've said it out loud.
Do any of you think about that, sort of what you put out there and how it might be perceived as something other than what you created? Or
I think as writers, we have to be truth tellers. And so you have to speak what your truth is, regardless of how people, you know, respond to it. Toni Morrison said that she never anticipated being widely read. So that gave her the freedom to write the stories that she wanted to write. And I think, and she also said, if there's a story out there that has been written and you want to read it, that you should write it. And so I think that if you're writing stories that you want to read, then the hope is that the audience will understand the subject matter, no matter how challenging it may be. But I don't think that you should censor yourself for fear that people will be offended or take it the wrong way, because then you're limiting your truth.
What about like the puppy folks? And I mean, they're not censoring themselves. Should they be writing all that crap they write?
Oh, the sad puppies.
And yeah. I mean, it's kind of tricky.
It is.
Yeah, I don't think it hurts to have, like, when you're in the beta reading phase, maybe to have someone read for sensitivity passing. If you have a character who's trans, or, you know, for me, if I'm writing a woman that's maybe dealing with issues that, you know, I as a man might not fully grasp or something, it doesn't hurt to have somebody of the community take a look at it and make sure you're not, you know, wildly off base with what you're writing, or that you're conveying something that you don't intend to convey. That's always a big challenge. I'm working on a novel now that's all of the main characters are female, kind of a whole spectrum of sexualities involved there. So I'm definitely not going to just rely on myself to make sure that I'm being authentic with that. I want to make sure other people that it's landing the way I'm intending it to land.
I
agree.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was thinking that you know, I agree with what Michael was saying about having sensitivity readers, but as readers also, I mean, I know we're all big readers as well, and I know sometimes I'll read something and I'll interpret it different than somebody I know who's a writer that, you know, read the same book. So everybody has different opinions, you know, as far as what they read. Like some people might take offense to what you wrote, and some people might relate to what you wrote. So I think it's kind of hit and miss. And I don't feel responsible for writing it, but I feel responsible for telling the story the way I want to tell it.
Yeah, so I did kind of wonder how you all are doing, like, in this time with all of with everything going on that is so horror show, are you finding it more difficult to tackle darker subjects, or do they come to you more naturally? I feel like I don't want to dwell in something that is a little too close to home about what's going on. But other people are shutting down from writing who are real workhorses, but then there are people who like are using all of the quarantine time and becoming really productive. How are you all doing?
I mean, for me, I'd say I'm still able to write. I'm trying to, if I'm not working on my novel, if I'm working on shorter pieces, I'm actually trying to actively resist writing something of the time. Like, because I feel like, you know, come March or June, we're going to start seeing all these calls for submission that basically say, like, please don't send us virus-related stories or corona-related stories, those kind of things. So I like to try to be a little more evergreen with what I'm writing, because keep the themes more universal, but, you know, don't make it sound like it was of its time, or, you know, it's where it kind of loses meaning over the years, and it's one of those, like, oh, you had to been there kind of stories. So that's, yeah, I'm trying to focus on the emotions and the elements rather than the specifics, I guess, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Can I jump in and ask about the emotions? So we're all going through a lot. Everyone's going through a lot. The world is sharing a pretty horrible experience. Is that like personal, like kind of emotional turmoil fueling in any way the characters that you're writing, the dialogue, or anything that's like the output of your writing?
In terms of emotions, I have wanted to write about what's going on with Black Lives Matter and police brutality, and I feel like I'm shutting down creatively when I think about it. I find I do so much doom scrolling, and I'm so checked into these stories about, you know, what's going on that it affects my work. So I'm trying to practice self-care and not write about those stories yet. I'm just taking notes on how I feel. But I am focusing on other issues, like my stories from the 80s that I'm working on that takes me out of what's going on currently.
I try to remember that, like, for the people who are in Syria right now, it's been bad for a really long time. People who live on the street in downtown LA, like, I've got it good. I really do. And I just have to ma'am up, as they say on Veep. It's like, you just got to tough through it and just be strong and get things done and keep going, because a lot of people are going to fail. And if you don't want to be one of them, you just have to keep going.
I'm still not there yet. How about you, Rena?
It's kind of strange for me. It's almost the same. I mean, I'm pretty much a recluse anyway. Really, the only time I would go out and travel was for conventions, and I do miss going out and seeing my friends. But as far as the creativity, it's the same. If I have a deadline, I will work hard and get it done and do my best. I'm still in the process of revising my next novel, and in that process, I have made some changes that go along with current affairs that are happening now. But for, you know, the pandemic though, and being quarantined, and there's a certain section in my story where it actually adds to the story, makes it a little bit better. So I may use a little bit of that in there, but it's not all about the story itself. It's not about what's going on right now, but things that have been going on forever, you know, racism and issues like that. But as far as everything else, it's sort of strange. It's kind of the same. And what Kate was saying, you know, I feel like I've got it good, but I've always been like that person that likes to one up what's going on now. Like, hey, you know, we're like 300,000 years overdue for a mass extinction event. That's how my mind thinks, you know. So you know, and being like, been in the medical field and being around, you know, germs and, you know, working in sterile environments my whole life, it's sort of, it creeps me out a little bit, but as far as my creativity, I don't think it's really affected it that much.
A bunch of y'all are braver than I am. I've been writing just the most boring, very sweet novel about times before when people would gather together and complex friendships and things that can keep me sort of on an even keel. Maybe they will. I don't know. I'm writing it for myself now just because I had to keep the practice of writing going. I was very happy to finish my book for you, Kate, because that story felt very complete. I'm happy to dive into that again, but creating new horror is a bit of a challenge for me right now. I was on a short story bent, but right now it's just, yeah, there might be some very dull stories about ponies or something. I'm not exactly sure. But I wondered if you all had any advice we'll take some questions as well, but I wondered if you had any advice for writers out there writing during this time. And also, you know, a larger question is sort of how do we write everything period now? Is it either period or pandemic, right? Or do we absorb all of this new information into going forward? I like, Rena, that you were talking about how it was like seeping in a because it worked with the story. Do you have advice? Oh yeah.
Yeah, no. My advice would be also is to read and like watch outside your genre. I noticed lately I've been watching a lot of romance, and I keep thinking to myself, you know what? I think I could write a romance. But then everybody always ends up dying, so it doesn't fit that formula, you know, for romance. But yeah, I think you know, and I read a lot of science and history and stuff anyway, but maybe try some like nonfiction that doesn't have to do with, you know, what's going on now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe stuff that, you know, happened a long time ago, or you know, archaeology things. But yeah, no, I feel like definitely some good advice would be is like to hop out of horror every now and then, you know, because I think after a while it would make you a little bit oversensitized with everything that's going on in real life and everything that you're reading in your fiction. Yeah, that's my advice.
Anyone else?
When cell phones and computers first came out, writers were horrified because you couldn't have to go to a phone box anymore, couldn't build tension, and you know, there was no manuscript, no papers, no letters to share with people. How are you going to tell a story without all that stuff? I think it's the same now. We just need to blend in the new details and just not point to them too hard. Just acknowledge them and keep going and tell the story, and don't worry about like where you're putting your hands or you know, right on by it until it's normal.
Right. Well, whatever that normal becomes, because it'll be different. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say too, if I find if I can't get going on a story, if the world is too, you know, whatever, and my brain's just not connecting to anything. I mean, reading is obviously a good way to kind of keep your brain active in terms of like looking at story structure and stuff. And then I also do, if nothing's coming and I just need to, you know, exercise the writing muscle, I'll usually, I have a book of like writing prompts or even just like Google, you know, calls for submissions for short story anthologies and things like that will usually, they all have themes and some kind of hook. And even if I have no intention of sending it out, you just like, I'll try to write one of those stories and, you know, see what you can do, go outside the box, and maybe you'll get a good story out of it, but at least you'll get practice, you know, get some reps in on there.
I agree with everyone else about reading, definitely to stay inspired. But one thing I've been doing lately is watching a lot of indie horror on YouTube. Like I feel like this rabbit hole of just like these crazy, like short 10-minute indie flicks, and I love it. And it takes me out of, you know, what's going on in the day, and I feel like I'm inspired, and I feel like it's a catharsis, really. And a lot of wine, too.
Do you feel like there's going to be a bigger demand for horror, or is it just people really going to want the pony stories where everybody's happy?
I absolutely think there's going to be a bigger demand for horror.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with Jordan Peele's new work coming out, I feel like people, like you said, we're going through a horror show right now, but I feel like everyday horror is something that, you know, people still want to see on the screen, you know? So.
Yeah, I agree. I'm one of those people that likes to see other people more miserable and having, you know, it's like, oh, that woman being chased by that guy with the axe. Oh, her life is way worse than mine right now. You know, I'm that kind of person too.
One of the biggest sellers on, Amazon, Netflix, all streaming was Contagion. And that really baffled me, but I think everybody's got to deal in their own way.
Did you watch it?
I saw it a couple years ago, but I have no desire to do so now. But for some people, it answered questions. Well, why don't we do it this way with the bracelets? Yeah.
Yeah, I own that movie. And when it first came out, I thought it was like one of the best movies I'd ever seen because, you know, for so long, because I read a lot of science, it's like, you know, scientists has been saying for so long. And so that movie I thought was like great. So I actually did rewatch it, and it, you know, was nothing like, it actually was better than what's going on. It's like, now if you could have just used that as an example,
they were organized.
Maybe.
Yeah. How was it for you, Kate, when you saw it again?
I was, at the time, there was no rioting going on, and there was quite a bit of rioting in the movie, and I'm like, really? We're going to do this? And then we did. It's like a documentary.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah, I think I was also going to add, I think Outbreak was the other movie that was trending high at the beginning of all this, the old Dustin Hoffman. And I wish more people would keep sharing that scene in the movie theater where they show someone coughing and all the droplets like spreading throughout the, you know, it's the lessons were there. We're just choosing not to learn them, I guess.
And Patrick Dempsey was Monkey Zero, basically, and we saw the droplets on the plane too. Yeah. Yep. I thought of that while flying recently.
Oh, God.
So there was a question from the audience. What do you all listen to while you're writing?
I listen to soundtracks.
Yeah.
Like epic, like movie soundtracks.
Do the movies change according to what you're writing or that you're listening to?
Do the movies change? Yeah, they do. And also, I listen to classical music. So.
Yeah, I can't listen to anything with words. So I listen to movie scores and movie soundtracks. Like Cliff Martinez, I think I have everything that he's ever produced and done, and Johan Johansson and Hans Zimmer. And I also have lately, I've been listening to this music. It's called Brainwaves, and it's supposed to tap your theta and your beta waves.
Wow.
And I found when I started listening to it, I started writing better. I mean,
Oh no, and she froze.
I'll put it up on my, I'll post it tomorrow.
Oh, great.
But yeah, it was
or
really
share
cool.
it in the chat if you, or I guess Cody can reshare. Anyway. Kate?
I've heard from people around me that I have a tin ear and no rhythm. So it causes me not to enjoy the sound of music, but to listen to the words like I'm listening to a short story. So that doesn't work for most songs. Like, what? So I don't know, some nice, I don't know what, like rave music is good. It's got the beat. I get it.
Mike?
Yeah, I tend to do instrumental, either movie soundtracks or, I mean, modern video games also have incredible soundtracks now, just fully orchestral things. And there's a couple of good Pandora stations. Usually if you put in an artist, there's a artist is called Two Steps from Hell. And I think they mostly do video game music, but you know, you put that in and it kind of builds an algorithm, and that's good for instrumental. And if I'm editing, I like to have kind of playlists of songs I've heard a million times. For some reason, that just kind of helps my brain kind of relax and find the right groove of music because I'm not listening to the words so much.
Right.
I used to be a music major like way long ago in college, and I find that if it's new songs or new things, my brain just kind of starts attaching to it, like, ooh, what are they doing over there? And I gotta kind of dig into that instead of focusing on the writing. So I either like to do, you know, instrumentals that I can kind of keep in the background, or songs that I've heard a million times before.
That's awesome. Cody, do we have more questions from the audience? I have another up my sleeve if...
Yeah, well, so we were talking earlier about whether people were going to read more horror or watch more horror. And for me, there's a good question around sweetness and lightness and how that comes into a horror story. And I was wondering if you all had opinions about that. I'm thinking like, I just read The Passage by Justin Cronin, which is a very long book, and it makes you feel better that we're not living in that world. But you know, there's a lot of moments that are very sweet and light in the midst of kind of really dark times. I'm wondering, like, how does that work out in your work?
We rewatched Parasite last night, and I was thinking about how that movie would absolutely not work if it wasn't for the fact that, and I'll speak very abstractly for anybody who hasn't seen it, that the family units all loved each other. And that really made everything more terrifying, and you were more emotionally invested and more tense. So,
which also calls back to the Octavia Butler story you were talking about, Bloodchild, right? Like,
yeah,
they care for each other, but it's horrifying.
And the family unit within the human family unit also has its own stuff going on too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think
he'd like to see the dark, though, right? The contrast is what makes it work at all.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like the darkness going after that lightness, like seeing it and trying to destroy it, that creates the,
Yeah, I have a story in my short story collection. It's more sci-fi, but a little bit of a horror element about how autonomous vehicles are kind of going to start shifting our economy and taking away like truck driver jobs and things like that. And it's more a story about a trucker who gets chosen for this experiment to literally like bond with one of these autonomous trucks and slowly losing more and more of himself in an effort to keep making money to keep his family together, to salvage himself. So there's kind of that sweet element of like he's trying, but everything's, you know, going the wrong way, and it gets kind of dark. But it's, I guess, instead of heading towards sweetness, it kind of goes the opposite way, and things just get
I wouldn't expect that from you, Michael.
You know, I'm an optimist.
I think sometimes I have to remind myself to inject the light and the sweetness, because it'll just be going like a straight line, hardcore, like darkness, horror. And I have to, and it's just to give myself a breather. My character's a breather.
There's some writers who do that.
To inject something with a little bit more levity. It can be tough, some hope.
Who were you, Kate?
Yeah.
Thinking of? Who were you thinking of?
Thomas Ligotti, perhaps. He's pretty consistently dark all the way through. It can be exhausting, though, I have to say. I do enjoy his writing, but wow, it wrings you out. But you don't want to read two in a row.
Right.
Laird Barron sometimes can be a little extreme with that.
Kind of a related question. Like, I've been thinking a lot about dread and the bad thing that you can see coming, that, you know, if we all did the right thing would be avoided, but it's not. And so it comes and you see it coming and it's coming and then it's here. Is that like a specific trope or storytelling technique or subgenre, or is that part of what makes us scared?
A big part of weird fiction, I know.
Right.
That's what it's based on rather than actual horror. It's more like a dread that builds.
And in ghost stories as well, I think. The dread builds before the actual. You don't quite know what it is.
Yeah, the mystery of that.
Well, they had, it reminds me of Hitchcock's dramatic triangle rule about building tension, is if two people, there's the audience, protagonist and antagonist, and as long as one person in there doesn't know what's going on but the other two do, it kind of ramps up the tension more and more as the story goes on. So like, we, the audience, know there's a bomb under the chair, the bad guy knows it's there, but the person that's sitting in the chair doesn't know the bomb is there, and we can see the clock ticking, that kind of thing. I think that applies to horror as well. Depending on how you use it, it can be a very effective technique.
So what kind of horror do you all think that like the country needs after this? What is the thing that's really going to bring that catharsis that we're all craving? Is it going to end up being vengeance horror? I'm sorry, Kate, what did you say?
What are we most afraid of right now? It's starving, homelessness, mob violence, disease, obviously.
I think it's hard because a lot of it feels like documentary instead of horror at this point.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the new like Saw reboot thing that they're doing with Chris Rock, and I can't remember the other actor. I think that's going to be great. Along with the Jordan Peele's Lovecraft Country. There's a lot of movies coming out. There was one folk horror. That I think it has seen sort of a resurgence. I wasn't really familiar with a lot. I wasn't really familiar with a lot of it, but reading it more like the Reddening and work like that. Adam Neville, I think, and something completely different from what's going on right now, and has sort of a historical aspect to it too. So I find it really interesting and I enjoy it.
I'm looking forward to Janelle Monáe has a movie Antebellum coming out.
Yes.
Pushed back because of COVID, and also Jordan Peele's Candyman remake. Nia DaCosta directed that. So I'm looking forward to more of this like black horror, that takes on contemporary issues, because I think it's needed.
Mm-hmm. It's needed. I think the older stories though will make people perhaps feel comfortable in watching it, and then the disease can do its magic work when he knocks us on our ass as he does.
I would say I think what we're going to see a shift towards a lot of micro stories and lower budget stories, being with Hollywood working on very limited crew size and other constrictions right now. I think what's going to happen, either studios are going to start like taking stuff off the shelf that they've been sitting on for a long time, which we're kind of seeing, but I think a lot of the new stuff is going to be tighter and smaller and more intimate and more, I think, socially aware and responsible. Like we keep saying these names, Jordan Peele and everybody. It's nice to have horror that's even going beyond just like the basic like human condition things that exist in other horror, but just to really dig into social conditions. And I think it's such a great mechanism to because people get drawn in by the scary story, and then you can just start kind of layering these things in there so that people leave the movie theater not just talking about how scary an instance was, but like at the end of Get Out, when those police lights hit at the end, that everybody in the audience is kind of like, oh no, there's this moment that's bigger than just like, oh no, the monster's back or something. There's this whole cultural avalanche that comes with that.
So another question from our audience. They want to know what your favorite pre-21st century work is, and what we'll start with that question. Pre-21st, not 20th.
Everybody's mind is racing.
Pre-21st, so before the year 2000. Right. What was your favorite horror at that time? Cast your mind back.
Gothic. Gothic horror. For me, it's probably still the same. Gothic.
Was there one that knocked your socks off?
Well, the short story by, it's called The Old Nurse's Tale by,
Oh, I've read that one. What is that?
yeah, it's in Lisa's new anthology. I remember
Gaskell.
telling her
Mary
about it.
Gaskell?
Yes, Elizabeth Gaskell. She was like the political version of Jane Austen at the time. She wrote a bunch of stories, but she had a collection of like Gothic tales, because I guess, during that era, it was popular for the women the authors to write a collection of ghost stories and whatnot. And that one it's one of my favorite stories still to this day. And that's what got me loving Gothic horror, and that's my pick.
Contemporary in Gothic horror, I have to say Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia was so good. I just burned through
I
that
haven't read
book.
it yet.
I'm not saying anything about it. I'm just saying you've got to read it. You're going to be very happy and satisfied, and there's a lot more going on there than meets the eye.
Eden Royce writes contemporary Southern Gothic horror, which is has like the Gullah. She incorporates the Gullah culture into it. Also, Zora Neale Hurston. Like, even though she's more folkloric, she has some like elements of horror to her short stories.
I love Flannery O'Connor. Yeah, I'll go with them. Although they're problematic today, but we're all problematic, we white people.
Michael?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I guess I probably in those years was burning through a bunch of Stephen King stuff. I don't know if I can even pick one. I also like to look into graphic novels, different kinds of storytelling, because my background was in playwriting, so I was constantly just like mixing media and finding, music or graphic novels or plays or anything that I could explore. So I think like things like that kind of got more experimental, like The Crow. I enjoyed quite a bit. And yeah, other than that, I haven't read a ton of, I'm just trying to think of like what my mindset was back then. So I think most of the horror I was doing was Stephen King, and because that's what everybody sort of
Clive
does when they start reading
Barker.
horror.
Clive Barker, yes.
Yeah, Clive Barker, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh my
so
God, those, yeah.
And Rice.
the canon,
Yeah.
but I've definitely expanded since then, but that's where I was. Yeah.
So do you have any contemporary recommends?
I want to second what Kate recommended to me. Kate, you had like a glowing opinion about Victor Lavalle's The Changeling.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, all right, I need a book. I want to pick this up. And it was one of the first like things that I dug into recently. And I was like, oh yes. Yes, very like so vivid and disturbing and surprising. Yeah, that one got me.
Next up, read his The Devil in Silver.
Okay.
Also excellent. And if you can get the audiobook, which he performs, and his voice is just wonderful for these.
He's such a marvelous writer, yeah. Anyone else for contemporary? Sorry, Nicole.
Kai Leaks. She writes like St. Louis, Chicago type of contemporary horror with zombies and.
Can you repeat the name?
Oh gosh, I forget the book. Sin
Oh
Eaters.
no. Can you repeat the author's name?
Kai, Kai Leaks, Leakes.
Okay, great.
I think her book is The Sin Eaters.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Michael, do you have anything you've read super recently that just flipped your lid?
I'm actually in the middle right now. I don't even know if I'm not done with it yet, so I don't know if I can fully classify it as
Don't you
horror,
always have to wait for the ending with horror?
Yeah.
Because if they blow it.
Yeah, it's Max Booth III has a book called We Need to Do Something. And I always like, monsters and ethereal stuff is, that's kind of what I truck in now. So, but like when it's just a book about human beings being really dark and awful and bad to each other, like somehow that hits me deeper than horror does a lot of times. And I'm only halfway into it, but it's basically a family trapped during a tornado warning in a tiny bathroom as their whole family unit's falling apart, and a tree hits the house and they're like can't get out, the power's failing, and it's like that's more immediate and visceral to me when I think of horror. You know, I'm just like, oh God, what's going to happen here? But that's I'm really enjoying it so far. So if you want like kind of more slice of life horror, it sounds like it'd be a good way to go.
And you'll chime in if the ending is just terrible.
Yeah, Max is good. He usually manages to land those planes, so I think we'll be in good hands.
Good. Rena?
For contemporary, I would say I really liked Nathan Ballingrode's the two novellas and I'm terrible with titles, but the two novellas that were in his collection, the one that opened it and the one that closed it, I think. One was Modern Story, and it was kind of like noirish, but weird and creepy and horrific. And then the story at the end was sort of, I love to be surprised when I'm reading something. And Lisa Minetti did this with her Death Watch 2 novellas collection, where it's a modern story and then you go back and it's the and it leads to the modern story. Yeah, I think those are really fun for me, and I really enjoyed both of his novellas in that one, and I could totally see them while I was reading the stories. Excellent.
So kind of along those lines, because someone was asking, is supernatural horror more appealing to you right now as it's an escape from reality, or are you still reading the real horror? Not reality-based horror.
We're living the real horror.
Yeah.
Psychological horror is still the scariest to me, because no matter what happens, like if what you perceive, you're not sure if it's real or not, I think that's the scariest thing ever.
Yeah, that's my favorite genre, pretty much. Anyone else? I don't know. I mean, I read it all.
Yeah, I mix it up too. So I wouldn't say that I focus on any one particular thing. I'm all over the place.
I don't like a lot of body horror. That's gross. Stop it.
I love it.
The escape I'm looking for now is being absorbed in the characters. So I'm a little more drawn to, a character and a whole world that'll draw me in.
Yeah. I think the story that kind of that whole, we read stories about monsters, to be scared of them, but also to understand that they can be defeated kind of thing. I think as long as the characters, in these times, I guess the feelings I'm having now, I prefer to read stories where people are kind of, even if they're coming out battered and bruised, they're at least on the right path, or they've learned something or grown somehow, and there's kind of that hope for the future that you can carry with you. Versus I guess before all this, I actually kind of liked those books that would kind of lurk over your shoulder when you're sitting alone in the living room. You're like, wait, this is like that scene in that book, and then you kind of have the creeps from that. So yeah,
hope is really important right now for me for reading.
Hope and like a protagonist that like saves us from zombies. Like I'm still very much into like the zombie slayers, the demon slayers.
Yeah.
Or protagonists who figure things. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kate.
Would you read or be interested in reading a book from the monster's point of view? Still, I like those, but they're more dark fantasy than true.
I tend to write those. I have a couple in my short story collection of kind of big, not really POV, but just like where misunderstood monsters, I guess you could say, where you go in thinking one thing and then you realize, the monster's not such a bad person. Yeah.
I think when I started reading horror, I like rooted for the monster actively. I felt like the monster was otherized, and I felt like it misunderstood. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted the darkness to win early on.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. I think I'll let Cody do the wrapping up, but it was really nice to talk to you all, especially in these unwieldy times. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank
you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Fun.
And we look forward to hearing what you have coming out next. I remember that Kate has a book coming out at the beginning of next year, so we'll look for that. But if anyone's got anything coming out, BookSwell is happy to let people know about that.
Michael, when is your book coming out?
My short story collection officially will release on October 1st.
Wow.
I have some copies advance for sale, so I guess if people want to hit me up through Facebook or something, I'm going to put a post up soon to start selling those.
And they can follow you at Monkey Write on Twitter. So
yes,
maybe that will,
that's probably the easiest way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, stay safe from the monsters. Thanks for being here. Don't be a monster.
All right.
All right, thanks. Take care, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks.